My name is Alice, and yes, I answer to it like the woman who's been through the looking glass and came back with a wrench in her purse. I'm 62, I make a mean orange marmalade, and I've survived a husband who loved airports more than anniversaries. I raised my boy, Gregor, between red-eye flights and PTA meetings, and I never once missed a school play until the day my boss told me, "Hugo, you're fired," and I smiled, grabbed the costume I sewed myself, and went anyway. That was the night I learned the taste of freedom, like cold air in December and cheap cocoa from the school cafeteria. I thought I'd secured my son's love for life. I was wrong. Gregor's love held just fine until he met Celesta and it sprang a leak. There were 2 days left until Christmas when the quiet in our house felt wrong, like a musical with no chorus. The tree in the living room looked like an apology, 8 feet of glittering good intention. I woke early to slip presents beneath it for Gregor, for his wife, and for the oldest man in the house, Roger 92, weathered as a barn door, sharp as the nail that holds it up. The kettle whistled. I squeezed oranges by hand like a pilgrim because Gregor likes it pulpy, and I buttered toast because Celesta claims toast is the only safe carb. The hallway, though, stayed stubbornly empty. I climbed the stairs, knocked softly, then pushed open their bedroom door. Bed made, no shoes scattered. The kind of order you only get when a person has packed everything they love and left. My stomach gave a low trader's roll. The elevator creaked and delivered Roger to the landing. He was wrapped in his robe, the blue one that makes him look like a retired admiral who still expects everyone to salute. He held a piece of paper with 2 fingers like it might bite. "Did you see that?" he said, voice ironed flat. "They just abandoned us for Christmas. They left the elderly at home." The note read like a slap written in glitter pen, "Merry Christmas. We went on vacation to Miami. Mom, look after Roger. Don't be offended. I didn't have time to buy you a present. I'll put $50 on your card. Buy yourself something." $50. The number was so small it squeaked. For one moment the room swayed. I pictured the bathroom tile and my face against it, and I truly thought I might get down on my hands and knees and empty out the ache where my boy used to live. Then Roger reached for my hand, palm warm, grip sure. "It's not your fault," he said, eyes doing that old man magic trick where they look straight through your defenses. "You raised a good son." My granddaughter talked him into it. "But I have a plan. If you help me, their Christmas will be worse than ours." He said plan like other men say prayer. Roger looked at me the way my father once did when I was 16 and had backed a car into the pecan tree like he trusted me to fix what I'd broken and what other people had broken for me. And I remembered. I'm not just a mother. I'm the woman who walked into her boss's office, got fired for loving her son out loud, and walked out with her spine intact. I helped Roger to the breakfast table. He sniffed the orange juice. "Fresh?" "Of course," I said. "I'm not the kind of woman who pours from a carton on a betrayal morning." He bared his gums in a smile. "Good. We should always go to war well nourished." War. The word sat between us, fizzing. "You need to understand how we got to this morning. It didn't start with a note and $50. It started the year Gregor saw Celesta at a charity gala where she raised money with other people's checks. Love at first sight, my son told me, his voice floating 3 inches above his head. I met her at brunch, eyes like mint glass, perfume that smelled expensive, and faintly disappointed. She commanded the room the way a conductor commands a train schedule. Everything ran when she said so, and God help the late. All that glitter came from Roger's house, though. His estate, white columns, oak floors, a library with a ladder that rolled and squeaked when you gave it a push. His daughter, Celesta's mother, had died in a plane crash 14 years ago with Celesta's husband and older brother. Tragedy had carved a hollowness in the family, and Celesta learned to stuff that hollow with diamonds. Roger loved her the way men who outlive everyone tend to love, fiercely, foolishly, with one eye closed so he didn't have to see what he didn't want to fix. Celesta wanted the estate, wanted it like oxygen. Twice she'd tried to ship Roger off to a nursing home with amenities, and twice he rolled himself back to the front door like a boomerang in a bathrobe. He had help, he always had help. People from the neighborhood, old friends from church, the mailman once, and his dog, Huck, who trotted out like a hairy bodyguard whenever Roger wandered. Huck is a golden with the soul of a bouncer and the patience of a saint. He leads Roger slow and steady down the sidewalk, ignoring gossip, squirrels, and temptation. In came Gregor, shining with new love and big ideas. "Mom," he said gently, "you could sell your house. Come live with us. You'll have your own room, your own bathroom, Celeste is pregnant. We'll need help with the baby. It'll be perfect. He didn't mention caretaking Roger. He didn't mention that my own room backed up to the laundry. He didn't mention that he'd taken the proceeds from the sale of my little bungalow, 30 years of mortgage and 3 coats of white paint on the porch rail, and slipped the cash into an account he controlled. For convenience, I gave it because I believe the world bends toward good if you push hard enough and make casseroles. I gave it because I am the kind of mother who thinks love is a verb. I moved in, my peonies in a blue vase like hostages, my quilt stacked in the closet like women waiting their turn to speak. I work as a florist, and I love it. The quiet of the cooler, the way hydrangeas sulk and then forgive you, the smell of damp stems and stubborn hope. After work, I cooked for Roger. I cleaned the room Celeste called the Red Wing like we were in a hotel. I ironed his shirts because he likes a crease you could cut paper on. I learned the pattern of his medications and the songs he hums when he shaves. He paid me in insults. You sold your house for a bedtime story, he'd say, voice like dry ice. You are a fool for agreeing to your son's terms. Another woman would have asked for a salary and a title. You signed up for slavery with sentimental benefits. I swallowed each one like a vitamin that might help later. My daughter-in-law would drift into the doorway, a hand on her barely their belly, and tilt her head so her earrings swayed. If you don't like it here, Alice, you can go, she'd say sweetly. I can't handle stress. I'm pregnant. Your tone gives me toxicosis. That's the problem with living for other people. They start charging late fees. Still, I believed I was being tested by life and finding myself worthy. I believed that endurance wasn't just a virtue, it was a strategy. I believed that if I took care of everyone, someday someone would take care of me. Then came the note, the Miami flight, and the vacuum silence of an empty house with a full tree. Roger sipped his juice and tapped the paper. She used my card, he said. All the reservations are in my name. She booked 5 stars because she thinks stars are the only guarantees in life. His mouth did a mean little smile that looked good on him. I'm fond of refunds. You're proposing we what call and cancel their fun? I asked, feeling something in my chest sit up and comb its hair. I'm proposing we return what doesn't belong to them, he said. My money, my name, my patience. We'll start with the spa. Cancel the spa and the all-inclusive service. Say it slowly. It's good for the soul. I laughed, because sometimes the sound on the way to battle is not a drum, it's a woman's laugh finally coming back home. You think this is just revenge? He leaned forward. I think it is education. I tried to love my granddaughter past her worst habits. She understood that as permission. She has mistaken love for weakness her entire life. Perhaps she needs a different dictionary. We spent the morning like conspirators in a cheerful kitchen. I brewed coffee that could wake the dead and pulled the folder Roger pointed to from the bottom drawer of the sideboard. Oh, he was ready. Photocopies of cards, bank contact numbers, a spiral notebook with neat columns, dates, charges, confirmation codes written in the tidy hand of a man who learned to survive by keeping his receipts. You kept all this? I asked. I keep everything, he said, including grudges, but I only cash those on holidays. Huck sat under the table, chin on my slipper, sighing like an old man at a fireworks show. I dialed. I used the kind voice I save for bridesmaids on the edge. Good morning, lovely. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Roger Whitcomb, card ending 2411. We need to cancel a reservation. Roger mouthed it with me. Cancel the spa and the all-inclusive service. Refund the 5-star hotel stay. Cancel the luxury car rental. Cancel the purchased return tickets. Cancel the insurance payment. The reps were surprisingly merry. It's amazing what you can accomplish in December when you open with elder fraud and close with yes, I'll hold. The confirmations stacked like dominoes. Between calls we talked. Not the brittle small talk of people who live near each other and far from the truth, the raw, useful kind. I was too hard on you, he said finally, the words slow, like he didn't like how they tasted. You are not a fool. You are a lover. Different disease, same symptoms. We heal it with self-respect. You don't need to apologize, I said. I took the job of saint and forgot it doesn't come with health insurance. You're too young to be locked in 4 walls, he said, the steel back in his voice. You will not be a nanny to grandchildren as penance for being a good mother. When I die, I want someone to look at your life and think, she started at 60. Have you seen our neighbor? He looks at you like hope in good shoes. He's asked me about you twice. I felt heat climb my neck, ridiculous and girlish. Emmett, I said, which is neighbor language for I have indeed noticed. He fixes his own truck, Roger said. He grows tomatoes like religion. He is the kind of man who still writes with a pen. Reliable men write with pens. He's just friendly. So is Huck, Roger said. But Huck doesn't bring over bourbon and look at you like midnight. We moved to the den, the tree winking like it knew a joke. I scrolled through flight records, pressed the last button to cancel the upgraded seats, and thought about the path that led me here. 1,000 tiny giving-ins, each one wrapped in the ribbon of be nice. I remembered the school auditorium the night my boss threatened my job, the way the curtain swayed, the dust in the spotlight, Gregor stepping on stage in the suit I made with my own two hands. I'd chosen him over everything. And now, he had chosen a woman who bought a first-class ticket with a man's last name and expected the airline to call her Your Highness. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Then another. Then mine and Roger's both. 36 missed calls for him. 29 voicemails for me Celesta likes to perform. I turned them face down on the table like tarot cards I was not yet ready to read. Let them marinate, Roger said. It improves the flavor. You're a cruel little Santa, I told him. I prefer efficient, he said. Then his face changed, softened, and he reached for my hand again. Alice, you should know this isn't just about punishing. It's about choosing. You will choose yourself now. You will not live the rest of your life as the footnote in your son's biography. I looked at our hands on the table, his papery and warm, mine steady. Finally, I thought of Emmett's laugh floating over the fence in summer, Huck's heavy head on my slipper, the florist cooler's loyal chill, and my own face in the mirror this morning. Creased sure, still beautiful because I said so. From the foyer, a draft slipped under the door, raising the edge of the abandoned note. $50. I smiled without humor. Roger, I said, how do you feel about changing the locks? His eyes lit. I thought you'd never ask. We spent an hour on the phone with a locksmith who knew his business and our kind of mood. While we waited, Roger had me pull another folder, the legal one. He tapped a page I wasn't expecting to see. Celeste convinced Gregor to put your house proceeds into an account in his name. You need to call the bank. Fraud requires fraud's opposite. Use your voice. The world opens for a woman who sounds like she knows the manager. So I called. I told the story in clean lines. No tears. No quiver. A representative with a mother somewhere heard me. A supervisor with a cousin who'd been taken advantage of approved the hold. The money that had once been my porch and my peonies and the first Thanksgiving where I hosted without burning the rolls froze into place as if it had been waiting for winter. The locksmith arrived, tattoos, toolbox, Christmas sweater with a reindeer that looked worried. He worked while Huck supervised and Roger told him stories about the Great War that were actually about 1973 and a very stubborn tractor. New locks clicked into a promise. When the man left, the house felt different, smaller, brighter. My phone, face down on the table, buzzed like a trapped wasp. I picked it up, opened a text. Mom, do something. All our accounts are blocked. We spent 2 nights on the floor at the airport. There are no return tickets. It's Christmas. Roger returned ours to the airline. Do something about Roger. He's completely crazy. Did you talk him into it? I typed, erased, typed again. In the end, I sent the only truth that mattered. It wasn't me. It was karma. This is what happens when children leave their parents alone on Christmas. I put the phone face down again, this time lightly, like I was setting a teacup on a saucer. Roger chuckled low. That will singe. Good, I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it was. I hope it writes itself on their memory. The afternoon turned gold, the kind winter only gives you when you've earned it. Roger asked for Bing Crosby. Huck dozed, paws twitching as if chasing something he already owned. My body remembered what it felt like to be tired from action instead of sorrow. Alice, Roger said quietly, I owe you a proper apology. And a proper proposition. Apology first, I said, always accountant with feelings. I mistook your kindness for cowardice, he said. I did what men do when we are old and frightened. We test the nearest good woman to see if she'll break. You didn't. You bent around everyone until you found your shape again today. And the proposition? He smiled, sly as a boy. Dinner tonight. You, me, Huck under the table, and our neighbor Emmett who will pretend he came to return a wrench and who will, if there is any justice left in this country, take one look at you in that red sweater and forget his own name. I told you I came back from the looking glass with a wrench. I also came back with lipstick. I'll make pot roast, I said, and I'll wear heels that say I remember how. Roger patted the folder he hadn't yet let me see, the one he'd slid under his hand like a secret he was vetting. And after dinner, he said, "I'll show you a Christmas present from my father to me, and it appears, from me to you." "Roger," I said, trying to be light, "if it's another folder of cancellation numbers, I already have enough joy for one day." He laughed. "No, Alice. It's a page that changes the shape of tomorrow." The doorbell rang. A neighbor, a wrench, an evening beginning. I checked the mirror and watched a woman I liked raise her chin. When I opened the door, Emmett stood there in his flannel, eyes warm, bourbon wrapped in a dish towel like he was ashamed of the bow. Behind me, Roger called, "Enter, sir. We've declared independence." Emmett looked at me, then over my shoulder at the tree. "Smells like pot roast," he said. "And revolution." "Both," I said. "You're right on time." What I didn't tell him, what I couldn't yet say with my mouth but felt blooming in my bones, was that the next few days would rewrite the map of my life. There would be refunded sweets and suitcases on the doorstep. There would be a note that made a sentence. There would be a will folded like a promise and unfolded like a dawn. But that was later. For now, I took the bourbon, took Emmett's arm, and walked him toward the kitchen, where Roger was waiting with a paper and a pen and a grin. "Ready?" Roger asked. "Oh, very," I said, and meant it. He slid the legal folder across the table. The top page had my name on it in ink that looked indecently official. "After pot roast," he said, eyes bright. "You'll want a full stomach for this." "What is it?" Emmett asked, good-naturedly nosy. Roger winked. "Consider it Act 2. And that, honey, is where we leave this first chapter. A kitchen smelling like onions and victory, a dog snoring underfoot, a neighbor with bourbon and courage, and a 92-year-old general about to hand me the kind of gift no one can wrap." Emmett set the bourbon on the counter like an offering and rolled up his sleeves. "What are we cooking and who are we defeating?" he asked, which, in my opinion, is the correct way to enter a kitchen. "Pot roast and moral decay," Roger said, wheeling himself to the head of the table as if it were a general's tent. "Alice, hand the man an apron, a pretty one. Humbling a good man early prevents peacocking later." I tied a floral apron around Emmett's waist and he leaned down to let me knot it. He smelled like cedar and December air, a clean, ordinary goodness that made me want to sit down and breathe. When I straightened, his eyes met mine, steady, curious, unafraid. Not a conqueror's gaze, more like the way you look at a sunrise you didn't expect. "We're putting a few things back where they belong," I said, arranging carrots in the roasting pan, "and teaching a couple of travelers that Christmas isn't a credit limit." "Ah," he said, with a soft whistle. "So this is a story." "It's several," Roger said, "and tonight you get chapter 2. While the roast browned, Emmett chopped onions with the smug competence of a man who survived bachelorhood without turning his kitchen into a museum. Huck stationed himself between Emmett and me with the seriousness of a Secret Service agent. Every time I moved, the dog thumped his tail once, as if saying, "Proceed." "What do you do, Emmett?" I asked, easing the Dutch oven into the oven. "I build things that don't fall down," he said. "Houses mostly. Porches for people who want to look at the world without falling out of it." "Contractor," Roger interpreted. "And modest. He also knows everyone in this town who can tighten a bowl or loosen a secret." Emmett chuckled. "I know who does good work and who says they do," he corrected lightly. Then almost shyly, "I delivered a pergola to your old bungalow once, Alice. You weren't home. The wisteria was planning a coup d'etat." "My wisteria always had ambitions beyond its trellis," I said, smiling despite the small ache of remembering the house I'd signed away like a library book I forgot to renew. We set the table. I used the winter china white with a little red rim because there is no reason to save pretty plates for the kind of people who don't deserve them. Roger supervised napkin folds. Emmett lit candles. The flame settled into itself. Outside, the bare trees clicked against the window like fingernails. Pot roast made the house smell like sanity. I mashed potatoes with an indecent amount of butter and wondered like a woman learning her new strength if I had been feeding sorrow all year when it would have preferred to be starved. We ate. Roger told stories too large for the room, farming with a tractor that had opinions, a 1949 rainstorm that baptized the whole county, a prank involving a rooster and a mayor who mispronounced municipal. Emmett laughed with his whole face. I listened, mouth curving, feeling the edges inside me soften in a way that didn't mean surrender. Halfway through, my phone chimed again. Then again. 36 missed calls for Roger had turned into 42. Celeste's voicemails had multiplied like rabbits. I ignored them. The roast had priority. You're calm for a woman in a siege, Emmett said, nodding at the phone. I've been in a siege since March, I said. This is just the day I found the gate. We cleared plates and I set out coffee and the good sugar. Roger wheeled closer to the sideboard, touched the legal folder like it was a sleeping cat, and looked at me. It's time, he said. Emmett began to stand. I can give you to privacy. No need, Roger said, flicking his wrist. You'll learn it sooner or later, and I prefer sooner. If you're going to fall in love with Alice, and you are, because men with sense always do, you might as well know what terrain you're walking. My heart did a very embarrassing hop that I tried to smooth with a cough. Huck snorted in canine solidarity. Roger slid the folder open. On top lay a crisp document with the header I knew from helping brides and widows sign contracts. Legal, solemn, designed to make decisions stick. My name appeared there in a careful serif, linked to words that knotted my breath. This is my will, Roger said simply. The newest one. The only one that matters. The house goes to Alice. I blinked. It wasn't a dramatic blink, just the kind a woman does to keep tears from ruining her makeup. Roger. No, Celesta. Celesta has had a will waved at her for so long it no longer registers as reality, he said, gentle but unbending. She believes inheritance is automatic, like sunrise. I should have corrected her years ago, but I was busy surviving grief with expensive distractions. I'm not rewarding ambition without affection. I'm giving my home to the person who made it a house again. I looked down. The words didn't change. They just sat there being true. My name, the house, the river of rooms I had swept and cursed and filled with soup steam and Bing Crosby. Relief rose in me so quickly it scared me. What does a woman do when a door she didn't dare hope for opens? I reached for the table. Emmett's hand was there, quiet, palm warm. I don't deserve that, I said softly, because old habits wear sensible shoes. You do, Roger said, and whether you believe it yet is none of my concern. What is my concern is protecting your good sense from your good heart. He tapped another page. I've already signed. 2 witnesses. Notarized. Locked at the law office. This copy is your courage in paper form. And Celesta? Emmett asked. Not with gossip but with logistics. Will receive a tidy trust that keeps her in groceries and lectures, Roger said. She will consider it an insult. I consider it a blessing, since she will have to earn the rest in kindness. I pressed my fingers to my lips and laughed, startled at the sound. Roger Whitcomb, you old tyrant, I could kiss you. Get in line, he said. Emmett has seniority tonight because he brought bourbon. We didn't drink right away. Instead, we strategized. If part 1 of our war had been finance the frozen accounts, the canceled suite, the vanished convertible, part 2 would be home turf. I wanted a boundary that shouted in plain English. We post a notice, Roger said, on the front door. Not a threat, a statement of reality. I pulled a pen from the junk drawer. I've always written notes like I was running a country. Block letters, no flourishes. We drafted the lines together, testing words like locks. Your keys will no longer open the store. Suitcases. Merry Christmas. I let the letters dry under the lamp like fingernails. Do we pack their things? Emmett asked. We do, I said, kindly, thoroughly, no pettiness. Pettiness creates paperwork. That next hour moved like a strange ballet. Emmett fetched boxes from his truck and labeled them with a contractor's stenciled clarity. I folded Celesta's dresses the way I'd once folded Gregor's stage costume, careful hands, even when my heart felt like glassware in an earthquake. I paused with one sparkly dress and surprised myself by admiring the stitchwork. She has taste, I said. She has access, Roger countered. Taste is what you do when the lights are off. We pack their toiletries, gadgets, chargers, as merciful as undertakers. Emmett carried suitcases down with a sure-footedness that soothed me. Huck followed him as if supervising a pilgrim with relics. By 9 o'clock, the foyer looked like a small, well-managed exodus. The note sat ready, its ink dry, its tone unmistakable. I taped it to the door with blue painter's tape because cruelty is not stronger if it peels paint. May I? Emmett asked. He took a step closer to the door, straightened the paper like a man aligning his life, and smoothed it once. He read the words aloud, not for drama, just to hear them travel the air. Your keys will no longer open this door, because they don't fit here. All your things are in these suitcases and boxes. You don't live here anymore. Merry Christmas. When he finished, the house held a silence that felt finished. A job done, a line drawn, my phone lit. I flipped it over almost lazily. 2 new voicemails from Celesta, 1 new text from Gregor. Mom, do something. We spent 2 nights on the floor at the airport. There are no return tickets, because it's Christmas. And Roger returned ours to the airline. Do something about Roger. He's completely crazy. Did you talk him into it? I typed back without asking permission from the committee that once sat in my head. It wasn't me. It was karma. Short, elegant. Roger approved. You could be a judge. Emmett looked at me. You okay? I'm adjusting, I said honestly. I've been the woman who apologizes for taking up space. Tonight I put a note on a door. You did more than that, he said. You taught your son where the door is. I didn't cry. I did the older woman's version. I put on lipstick. Red, because subtlety is for people who still think they're negotiating. We finally poured the bourbon. It burned kindly. We toasted things that mattered: the dog, the roast, the locksmith with the worried reindeer sweater. Emmett stayed after dishes, wiping the last plate like a promise. You're brave, he said at the sink, voice low, words meant for me alone. I'm late, I said. Brave is what you call a woman who should have done this 5 years ago. He turned to face me. The kitchen light gave him a halo he did not need. Late still counts. My mother used to say, the door you finally walk through becomes the front door. Your mother is a thief, Roger called from the den. She stole my line. Emmett laughed. He took a step closer. The space between us changed temperature. Huck, gentleman that he is, turned his head to stare determinedly at the refrigerator as though privacy were a moral duty. Emmett didn't touch me. He just stood in a circle of my air and looked the way men used to look before they learned how to be coy. Can I take you to breakfast tomorrow? He asked finally, as if offering a hand to a woman stepping off a boat. There's a diner that still believes in butter. I like institutions that still believe in butter, I said, and felt my mouth smiling like it knew how. 7:30, Roger interrupted. Alice sleeps in when she isn't rescuing fools. He yawned like a cat considering world domination. And we have a appointment with the bank. Emmett, can you drive her? I don't want Celesta laying eyes on her in the parking lot and inventing a performance. I can, Emmett said. And if Celesta does appear, I can also misdirect her with an urgent conversation about roofing. Every queen has a leaky roof, Roger said. It's the narcissism. Hot air rises. The night began to wind down. Emmett helped me tuck a blanket over Roger's knees. The old man caught my wrist with surprising gentleness. I was unkind, he said, like a statement of weather, not of guilt. I won't be again. I forgive you, I said, which is not the same as forgetting, but sometimes it's better. Emmett put on his coat. At the door, he hesitated under the taped note, then glanced at me. By the way, he said, tone casual, I installed the security camera on your porch last summer, Roger, when you were off arguing with Celesta's latest nurse. It's still synced to my phone in case you forget your password again. If you want, I'll tie your account to Alice's as well. Do it, Roger said immediately. Alice, you need to see Fools Coming. It's good for posture. Emmett's fingers moved quick and sure. 2 pings later, my phone showed a crisp view of our front steps, buckets of suitcases, and a slice of Winter Street. Power does not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives as a small rectangle of truth you can hold in your hand. He turned to go, then stopped, like a man remembering where he left his courage. One more thing, he said, eyes steady on mine. You don't have to be grateful to me for liking you. That's on me. I felt something expansive rise in me, like a new room being discovered in a house I thought I knew. Noted, I said, and returned. When the door shut behind him, the house sighed like a grandmother who's finally gotten everyone to bed. Roger cleared his throat. You'll be all right? He asked. I already am, I said. Good, because tomorrow we escalate. More cancellations? Fewer calls, he said. We block numbers. We tell the lawyer. We tell the housekeeper to come at 10 and change the linens in the guest room, yours, not theirs. We live. That's the escalation. I helped him to his room. He paused at his dresser, opened a drawer, and took out a small velvet box I hadn't noticed before. He pressed it into my hand. From my mother to mine to me, he said, avoiding my eyes like a teenager with a crush. You can look later. It's not for their eyes. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed with the velvet box heavy on my palm. My phone buzzed one last time. A single message from an unknown number. Alice, it's Celesta. I will ruin you. I stared at the words until their poison diluted. Then I typed, with the patience of a florist pruning thorns. I've been ruined before. It didn't take. I set the phone down, opened the velvet box. Inside lay a thin gold bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a key. Taste, not access. I fastened it on, felt it kiss the inside of my wrist, and lay back, fully dressed, heels kicked to the floor. Huck snuck in and pressed warm weight against the bed frame, an old soldier standing watch. Sleep took me like a tide. It carried me through a dream where I was walking down a hallway of doors, each one labeled with a life. I chose one with my name on it, opened it wide, and found a kitchen that smelled like pot roast and plans. The morning would bring bank managers and forms and the small theater of polite firmness. The evening would bring, if I was very brave and a little greedy, a diner booth, butter that didn't apologize, and a man who looked at me like home. But before all that, at some hour that belonged to no one but us, the front camera ticked awake and lit my phone. Two figures stood on the porch, cold and furious, snow caught in the rims of their designer hoods. Suitcases stacked like judgment at their knees. One of them reached for a key, tried the lock, failed, and bent forward to read the note. I watched their faces go from triumph to confusion to insult to comprehension. I did not smile. I simply watched them discover the shape of the door I had finally built, and then the screen pixel switched. Celesta lifted her chin, pressed her finger to the camera lens as if silencing a witness, and mouthed a single word I read perfectly. War, education. I whispered back to the quiet room, and slept as soundly as a woman who has finally learned what to do with the morning. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was already spilling over the curtains like it had been waiting for permission. Huck's nose was on my knee. Roger's old record player crooned a scratchy Nat King Cole from somewhere down the hall. The smell of bacon floated in an unrepentant, full-fat kind of smell that doesn't apologize to anyone's cholesterol. I swung my legs over the bed and felt taller somehow. Maybe it was sleep, maybe it was victory. Maybe it was the faint pulse of that gold bracelet on my wrist reminding me that some promises are finally kept. I pulled my hair back, put on my wool skirt, and went to the kitchen. Roger was already there, with a newspaper spread before him and Huck drooling gently beside his chair. "Morning, soldier," he said. "We survived the night uninvaded." "Barely," I said, pouring coffee. "They came. Around 3 a.m. suitcases and all. Read the note. Tried the key. Didn't get in." He smiled, not the satisfied grin of vengeance, but the quiet peace of a man whose boundaries have finally been enforced. Good. I was hoping the camera caught the moment when Celesta realized her kingdom had shrunk to 2 carry-ons. "Oh, it caught it," I said. And she gave the lens a little monologue too. Something about war. Roger sipped his coffee, calm as an oak in a storm. "Then we're ahead. Education is always 2 steps faster than war." I set my cup down. "You're taking this rather serenely, considering your granddaughter just declared hostilities." He folded the paper. "Alice, at 92, serenity is cheaper than medication. Besides, she's playing checkers, and I'm holding the chessboard." He had that twinkle again, the one that made me half want to laugh, half want to salute. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted us. 3 short taps, confident, warm. I knew that rhythm. Emmett. When I opened the door, he was standing there with 2 travel mugs and a paper bag. "Peace offering," he said. "Coffee strong enough to melt asphalt, and the kind of biscuits that make you reconsider religion." "Perfect," I said. "You're 5 minutes early." "Old habit," he said. "Early means you get parking, or forgiveness." Roger wheeled in behind me. "Forgiveness is overrated. Parking, though, now that's salvation." We ate the biscuits at the table, crumbs everywhere, laughing like conspirators at brunch. Emmett told us that word had already begun circulating in the neighborhood, something about a domestic mutiny at the Whitcomb place. Apparently, Celesta had been seen outside at dawn, fur coat dragging, yelling into her phone. "She'll burn through half of Miami's battery supply before noon," Roger said dryly. Emmett looked at me. "You ready for the bank?" "As ready as a woman who just learned she owns the house she cleans," I said. "Let's go." The bank lobby smelled of pine-scented air freshener and money that never sweats. I'd brought Roger's paperwork, every copy labeled and cross-referenced in his impeccable handwriting. Emmett waited in the truck outside, letting me walk in alone. His kind of chivalry meant knowing when a woman wants her own stage. The manager, a polite man with gray temples and the personality of a cautious handshake, smiled too much. "Mrs. Whitcomb," he said. "No, I corrected. Alice Martin, the woman who sold her home last year under false pretenses and would now like to reclaim what's hers. His smile faltered slightly. I placed the notarized documents on the table with a satisfying thump. Roger had highlighted the relevant sections like a general drawing battle lines. We're not here for sympathy, I said, watching his eyes scan the pages. Just truth. And truth leaves a paper trail. By the time we were done, the account that Gregor had quietly moved my house money into was frozen tighter than a Thanksgiving turkey. The bank would investigate the misappropriation. I left them with Roger's lawyer's number and a smile that could slice glass. When I came back out, Emmett leaned against the truck. One boot crossed over the other. You look 10 pounds lighter. I feel 50 pounds freer, I said, sliding into the passenger seat. Roger's right, it's better than therapy. We drove in companionable silence for a few miles, the kind that hums softly instead of shouting to fill the air. Then Emmett said, you know, you don't have to fight this all alone anymore. I looked at him. His profile was steady, carved by sun and time, eyes fixed ahead but not avoiding me. I'm not alone, I said softly. I have Roger, and Huck, and apparently a neighbor with biscuits. He grinned. And a hammer. Don't forget the hammer. Back home, Roger was waiting with that familiar half smirk and a stack of envelopes. While you were reclaiming your fortune, he said, I've been busy filing ours. He slid one envelope toward me. It was thick, official looking, embossed. I opened it. Inside was a letter from his lawyer confirming the updated will. The language was formal, cold even, but at the bottom, Roger had scrawled in pen, "This is my father's gift to you, and my thanks for giving me back my home." I looked up. Roger was pretending to read the newspaper again, but his ears were red. You old softy, I said. If you keep this up, I'll start knitting you a scarf, he grumbled. Just don't make it red, too festive. People will think I'm sentimental. You are sentimental, I teased, just heavily armed with sarcasm. He chuckled. Touche. That evening, the house glowed. The Christmas tree shimmered. The roast leftovers reheated into something even better, and Huck, loyal as gravity, stationed himself under the table once again. Emmett arrived right on cue, this time with a pie. Apple, he said, the kind that makes you rethink every diet you've ever been on. Roger lifted his glass of cider. Then to rethinking, we'll toast to that. Dinner was loud, warm, and full of the kind of laughter that shakes the dust off a house. We spoke of small things, gardens, books, the peculiar satisfaction of clean laundry. We didn't mention Miami, or betrayal, or how easily love can turn into expectation. The silence around those things was companionable, not heavy, like a scar you've learned to live with. When Emmett stood to leave, he looked at me and said quietly, "That breakfast offer's still open, you know." I smiled. You mean tomorrow? He shrugged. Or any day after that. You pick the day. I'll bring the butter. I walked him to the door. Outside, snow had started to fall, soft, slow, determined. He looked up at it, then at me. You've got light in your window again, he said. And then before I could reply, he kissed my cheek. Just that, simple, respectful, warm enough to melt the snowflake that landed on my jaw. When I turned back inside, Roger was grinning like a grandfather who'd won a bet. Well, it's about time someone noticed you were still alive, he said. I was starting to think the men in this town were legally blind. Go to bed, Roger, I said, trying not to blush. Before you start matchmaking and ruin a perfectly good friendship. I'm 92, not dead, he muttered, wheeling himself toward his room. And trust me, the difference is smaller than you think. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the pie, maybe the kiss, maybe the way life had turned upside down and landed, miraculously, the right way up. I got out of bed, padded barefoot to the window, and looked out. The snow had stopped. The porch light burned golden over the note still taped to the door. Celeste's suitcases were gone. Someone must have picked them up. But on the porch railing, someone had left a single rose, fresh and perfect, its stem wrapped in silver ribbon. It wasn't Celeste's style. No, this was the work of someone who understood quiet gestures. I smiled and whispered into the empty room. You really didn't have to bring flowers, Emmett. And for the first time in years, I went back to bed with the kind of peace that doesn't ask permission to stay. The next morning, Roger was waiting with mischief in his eyes and a plan on his lips. Alice, he said, today we finish our education project. Project? I asked warily. He slid a newspaper across the table. Public notice section. I've placed a small ad announcing Celeste's removal as my legal guardian and naming you as my next of kin and executor. I blinked. Roger. That's going to drive her mad. He smiled. Precisely. And madness, my dear, is sometimes the first step toward reflection. You're enjoying this, I said, trying not to laugh. Of course I am, he said, but so are you. Admit it. I did. God help me. I did. But beneath the laughter, something else was growing quiet, like snow layering a field. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as a helper, not as a placeholder, not as a mother trying to earn love, but as a woman with her own story. A story not ending in duty, but beginning in choice. When Roger dozed off in his chair, I stepped outside. The world was white, silent, new. Emmett's rose was still there, a little frosted now, but still standing. I touched its petals and whispered, maybe this is what rebirth feels like, not fireworks, but a steady warmth coming back to the hands. And behind me, through the open window, Roger's voice floated out, half asleep, half laughing. Don't stand out there too long, Alice. You'll freeze before love can warm you. I smiled. You underestimate me, old man. I've lived through colder winters than this. And with that, I turned toward the house, my house, and felt the first hint of a future I hadn't dared to imagine beginning to unfold. The first Monday of the new year rolled in with that particular gray light that feels like unfinished business. Snow on the ground, coffee brewing, Roger humming Let It Snow in his reedy baritone. Huck had claimed his usual position by the fire, chin on his paws, watching us with that wise suspicion dogs reserve for humans who look too pleased with themselves. Roger had good reason to be pleased. His ad in the paper had landed like a grenade in a gallery. Celeste's name printed in the public notices section, stripped of the title legal guardian, replaced neatly by mine, had been the talk of the whole neighborhood by lunchtime. By evening, I had 20 missed calls and one particularly creative voicemail from her. You think this is funny? You've turned my grandfather into your puppet. You're a manipulative old. That's where Roger had paused the recording and deleted it. I'll not have profanity on my voicemail, he'd said primly. My generation reserved those words for war. So there we were, 3 days later, quietly victorious, eating oatmeal, when the doorbell rang. Roger raised a snowy eyebrow. That, my dear general, is either the postman or the enemy. I straightened my robe, wiped my hands on a towel, and went to the door. It was Gregor. He looked smaller than I remembered, paler, thinner, his good coat creased from travel. Behind him, a taxi idled, its exhaust curling into the cold air. Mom, he said softly, we need to talk. The words every mother both hopes for and dreads. Do you? I said, because the last time we talked, I ended up holding a note and $50. He flinched, a quick, guilty jerk of the eyes. Please, just let us in. Celeste is waiting in the car. We just want to explain. Roger had rolled himself up silently behind me. I believe explanations are best delivered by appointment, he said crisply. Grandpa, Gregor began, please, but I cut in. You can both wait in the car until the lawyer calls. Roger doesn't owe you his home, and I don't owe you my silence. He looked at me then, really looked, maybe for the first time in years. Something flickered in his face, part confusion, part shame. You've changed, Mom. I smiled, a little sadly. No, Gregor. I finally stopped changing for everyone else. I closed the door gently, not angrily, and leaned against it for a moment. Roger's hand settled lightly on my shoulder. You handled that with more grace than I would have, he said. I was considering a slingshot. I've learned that silence can sting harder than sermons, I said. Roger nodded approvingly. Good woman. Now what do we do next? By noon, our next came to us. Celeste had posted on social media a blistering monologue about elder abuse and greedy housekeepers. Someone forwarded it to me, probably thinking I'd faint. Instead, I made cocoa, added a little whiskey, and toasted the phone. She's unhinged, Roger said, reading over my shoulder. You'd think she invented drama. She's just scared, I said. Scared people shout so they don't hear the echo. He gave me a look both amused and proud. I can see why Emmett's smitten. You quote philosophy while serving cocoa laced with rebellion. At the mention of Emmett, my heart did that inconvenient skip it had been practicing lately. He'd been dropping by most evenings now, never with an excuse, just with something in his hands. Firewood, soup, a laugh. We'd taken to playing gin rummy after dinner, Roger acting as referee and heckler. Sometimes, after Roger went to bed, we'd stay in the kitchen, talking about nothing and everything the quiet way people talk when the world outside has stopped demanding. That night, he showed up again, holding a stack of mail. "Your son's lawyer sent this," he said, handing me an envelope. I slid it open carefully. The letter inside was formal, defensive. It accused me of undue influence over a vulnerable elder and hinted at legal action. Roger read it, snorted, and said, "Undue influence. At 92, I've only ever been influenced by bacon and logic." "Don't worry," Emmett said. "This kind of letter's all bark. My sister's a paralegal. I can have her draft a reply that'll make their attorney regret charging by the hour." Roger grinned at him. "Marry her, Alice. The man speaks fluent strategy." I laughed, but inside, my heart squeezed. It had been decades since anyone had stood with me rather than on me. Emmett didn't try to rescue. He just stood firm beside me, as if saying, "You're enough." A week later, the lawyer's counter letter had silenced Gregor's threats. The estate was legally secure. The accounts remained frozen. The story around town had shifted from "Poor Celesta" to "Serves them right." Even the pastor's wife stopped me at the florist and whispered, "Good for you, dear. Some lessons need to be taught with receipts." By now, Roger's health had taken a small dip, fatigue, a cough, but his spirit was mischievous as ever. One afternoon, as I helped him with his cardigan, he said, "Alice, promise me something, anything." I said, "When I go, and I will, sooner rather than later, don't mourn me like I'm gone. Mourn me like I finally finished a long shift." I squeezed his hand. "You'll outlive us all out of sheer spite," he laughed. "That's the plan." That night, the three of us, Roger, Emmett, and I, sat by the fire. Huck snored between us. Roger had insisted on opening a bottle of champagne for closure. "To justice," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Emmett added, glancing at me. "To both," I said. "And to learning that revenge, when done properly, tastes suspiciously like peace." The fire cracked. Roger leaned back, eyes half closed. "You know, Alice," he murmured, "you're the best Christmas present I ever received." "Careful," I said. "You'll make me sentimental." "Good," he said. "It suits you." He fell asleep in his chair not long after, a smile still on his lips. Emmett helped me tuck a blanket over him, and when we turned, we found ourselves face to face, the fire painting everything gold. "He adores you," Emmett said softly. "I adore him right back." "And me?" he asked, half joking, half serious. I could have laughed, deflected, said something clever, but I was tired of cleverness. Instead, I stepped closer. "You," I said, "I'm still deciding about." He smiled, that slow, patient smile of his. "Then take your time. I'm not going anywhere." And when his hand found mine, it wasn't dramatic. It was just right. Warm, solid, real. The next morning, I found Roger's note. He'd tucked it into the edge of his newspaper, folded neatly in half. "Alice," it read, "if you're reading this, I've finally taken my leave. Don't cry. You'll ruin your mascara, and you've got a lunch date with a man who looks at you like spring. I've left the house to you as promised. It belongs to the woman who gave it back its laughter. Take care of Huck and yourself. R." I sat there a long time, the note trembling slightly in my hands. I didn't sob. I didn't even speak. I just pressed my lips to the paper and whispered, "Thank you for the gift of my life back." When Emmett arrived later that day, I handed him the note. He read it, nodded, and said quietly, "Then let's honor him properly." "How?" I asked. "By living," he said simply. "By making this house louder than grief." And that's exactly what we did. 2 months later, the garden was blooming again. Huck had found a new rhythm, sleeping at my feet, nudging Emmett's hand when he thought it was dinner time. The house was still Roger's, but it was alive now in a way it hadn't been in years. Sometimes at sunset, I swear I could hear his laughter echoing down the hall, dry and amused. And once, while pruning the roses by the porch, I found something I hadn't planted, a single white rose, blooming from a root I didn't recognize. Its petals were immaculate, its scent soft as forgiveness. Emmett came up behind me, resting his hand lightly on my shoulder. "Where'd that come from?" he asked. "Maybe it was always here," I said, touching the bloom. "Just waiting for the right gardener." He smiled. "Seems fitting." "Why?" "Because," he said, "you're finally blooming too." And when I turned to face him, the world seemed to slow. No grand declarations, no music swelling, just the simple, sure feeling that love, when it finally comes to a woman who has earned her peace, feels a lot like coming home. But peace, as Roger would have said, is never the end of a story. Because one evening, just as the sun dropped behind the trees and the wind carried that faint smell of wood smoke, a letter arrived. A new one. Return address. Celesta Whitcomb. Emmett saw it first. You want me to burn it? I smiled, taking it gently from his hand. No, I said. I think I'll read it. After all, education isn't over until the final exam. And as I broke the seal, Huck lifted his head. Roger's wind chime rang softly in the yard, and I knew whatever was inside that envelope, I was ready. The envelope felt heavier than paper ought to. I turned it over once, twice, tracing the slanted, impatient handwriting across the front. Celesta Whitcomb, still clinging to a name she'd never earned, as if ink could outrun truth. The wax seal was pretentious, of course rose gold, with an embossed C. She'd probably spent half a day finding the exact shade of self-importance. Emmett stood beside me, arms folded. Huck had padded in from the kitchen, tail wagging once before settling by my feet. The chime on the porch gave a soft tinkle, as though Roger himself had just leaned over to say, "Go on. Let's see what the girl's got to say for herself." I tore the seal. The letter was longer than expected, 3 pages, written in a looping script that tried for elegance but stumbled on bitterness. Alice, you may think you've won. You've taken my grandfather, my home, and humiliated me in front of the entire town. But you can't erase blood. I am his family, not you. Everyone says you've bewitched him, that you took advantage of an old man's loneliness. Maybe you think you're noble. Maybe you think this is justice. But I will get back what's mine. I'm meeting with new lawyers. You'll be hearing from them soon. Peas. Gregor is still miserable. You broke his heart, you know. You've turned my husband against me. I hope you can live with that. There was no signature at the end, just an empty flourish, like she'd run out of ink or rage. I passed the letter to Emmett, who read it without a word, jaw tightening. When he finished, he looked at me with that patient steadiness that's rarer than love itself. Do you want me to handle this? He asked. I shook my head. No, I'll handle her myself. He smiled a little. That's my girl. That afternoon, I called Roger's lawyer, Mr. Kensington, a weary man with the cautious smile of someone who's seen too much family drama and learned to invoice accordingly. She's threatening new counsel, I told him. Should I brace for a court date? He chuckled. Celesta Whitcomb has been threatening lawyers since she was 25. Last time, she sued a boutique for emotional distress because they refused to take a return on a fur coat. Don't lose sleep over this. You're legally unassailable. That's comforting, I said, though I still felt that old knot in my stomach, the one all mothers know, where guilt and love sit side by side like quarrelsome roommates. After I hung up, I sat at Roger's old writing desk and took out a fresh sheet of stationery. The one with gold edges. The one he used when he wanted to sound both kind and terrifying. I began to write. Celesta, thank you for your letter. You're right about one thing, I did win. But not in the way you think. I didn't win your grandfather's house. I inherited his respect. I didn't take your husband. I simply stopped protecting you from the mirror. You say I can't erase blood, and you're right again. But love doesn't come pre-packaged with DNA. Roger saw you for what you chose to become, and me for what I refused to stop being. I hope your lawyers are better than your manners. Merry Christmas again. Alice Martin. I didn't send it. Not yet. I placed it in Roger's old cigar box on the mantel, the one labeled unsent letters and other forms of mercy. Roger used to say, sometimes the satisfaction isn't in sending the message, it's in knowing you could. Life settled into a rhythm again. The florist shop kept me busy. Valentine's was coming, and broken hearts still buy flowers. Emmett came by every evening, helping with the dog, fixing hinges, pretending not to stay for dinner until he inevitably did. Sometimes, we sat in the den, the fire low, the room smelling of cinnamon and the faint musk of Huck's paws. He'd tell me about the house he was building on the other side of town, a modest, sunny thing with wide windows and a porch that begged for lemonade. One day, he said, stirring his coffee, I want to build one that feels like this house. Lived in. Brave. I smiled. Brave? He looked at me, eyes catching the firelight. A house can be brave when it stands through storms. You've made this one brave again. That's when he reached across the table and took my hand just like that. No big gesture, no nervousness. Just two people who'd survived enough winters to know not to waste a warm night. You know, he said quietly, I think Roger planned this. Oh, he did, I said. That old fox left instructions for the afterlife, I'm sure of it. A week later, While sorting through Roger's desk drawers, I found an envelope marked for Alice Reed after February. It wasn't February yet, but curiosity is stronger than virtue. I opened it. Inside was a letter in Roger's shaky hand. My dear Alice, if you found this, I assume Celeste's tried at least one more scheme. I've lived long enough to know she never loses gracefully. Enclosed, you'll find a copy of my final letter to her, one I never mailed. I told her that a woman who cannot love without ownership will spend her life mistaking gifts for debts. I told her I forgave her, but forgiveness isn't a key, it's a locked door that simply stops needing guarding. I hope you've met someone who looks at you the way my Margaret once looked at me, like home after a storm. If he builds you a porch, keep it messy. Life's better that way. Yours in stubborn joy, Roger. The tears came then not from sadness, but from gratitude so fierce it stung. I placed the letter back in the envelope and whispered, you old prophet, you knew everything. Emmett found me there an hour later, sitting by the window, eyes puffy but smiling. He wrote you again, didn't he? He asked softly. I nodded. He's still bossing me from beyond the grave. Emmett knelt beside me, brushed his thumb under my eye, and said, good. Maybe he can put in a word with the universe to make sure I don't mess this up. You won't, I said. And for once, I believed it. Spring arrived like an apology. The snow melted. Daffodils nosed through the soil. The town stopped whispering about the Christmas scandal and started bringing me pies and gossip instead. Gregor sent a letter, not a long one, not a good one, but an honest one. Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Celeste has gone back to Miami for a while. Maybe that's for the best. I just wanted to say, you were right about everything. I hope we can start over someday. Love, Gregor. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back, Gregor, starting over isn't a place, it's a way of walking. When you learn to walk without stepping on anyone else's heart, my door will be open. Mom, this time, I did send it. On the first truly warm evening of April, Emmett came over with a small box under his arm. What's this? I asked, eyeing it suspiciously. Insurance, he said, in case you ever decide you want a second chance at adventure. Inside was a single train ticket, first class, to anywhere I wanted to go. He'd left the destination blank. You think I'd just up and leave? I teased. No, he said. I think you deserve to know you could. Something in me broke open, then not the fragile kind of breaking, but the kind where light gets in. I leaned forward and kissed him, soft but certain. The kind of kiss that says, I've earned this. When we pulled apart, he whispered, that felt like a yes. It was, I said, to life, not to leaving. That night, I sat by the fire alone for a while. Huck snored at my feet. The wind hummed through Roger's wind chime, and the house felt full not of ghosts, but of gratitude. I thought of the girl I'd been once, the one sewing costumes by lamplight, praying her son would love her more than the world did. And I thought of the woman I was now, steadier, wiser, still fierce, but free. Roger was right. Life after 60 isn't about surviving. It's about claiming. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I finally had. But stories, especially mine, rarely end with peace alone. Because just when I thought the last chapter had been written, I got a call one Sunday morning. The voice on the other end was smooth, clipped, and unmistakably professional. Mrs. Martin, the man said, this is Detective Harris from the county police. I'm calling regarding your late friend, Mr. Roger Whitcomb. We've received some unusual financial reports from his accounts. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I froze, the world narrowing to that one name, Roger. Detective, I said carefully. What kind of reports? He hesitated. We believe someone attempted to access one of his trust accounts last week using Celeste Whitcomb's identification. For a moment, I didn't breathe. Then the fire in me, the one that had been simmering for months, came roaring back to life. Detective, I said calmly, you tell me what you need. Because this time, I'm not just going to protect Roger's memory. I'm going to finish his lesson. And when I hung up, Huck barked once, sharp, approving. The wind rattled the chime like applause. I reached for my coat, my lipstick, and the car keys. War, or as Roger preferred to call it, education wasn't quite over yet. I have always believed that a woman over 60 doesn't start her day until she's had two things: a cup of strong coffee and a good reason. That morning, Detective Harris gave me both. The coffee was scalding, the kind that made you feel alive from the throat down. The reason? A phone call that began with the word fraud. When Roger was alive, he used to say, trust everyone, but cut the deck yourself. I hadn't realized how literal that advice was until I found myself marching into the police station, coat buttoned to the neck, hair pinned back, carrying the folder Roger once called insurance for when the world misbehaves. Detective Harris met me at the front desk, mid-40s, neat haircut, wedding ring, the sort of man who takes his job seriously and his coffee black. "Mrs. Martin," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming in. It's Miss Martin," I corrected, shaking his hand firmly. "Mrs. died with my illusions." He blinked once, then smiled faintly. "Right, Miss Martin. Please, have a seat." He explained that Roger's trust account, one reserved for charitable donations, had been accessed 2 nights ago. Someone had used Celesta Whitcomb's identification to attempt a wire transfer of $80,000 to an offshore account. The bank's fraud department froze it immediately. "You were listed as the estate executor," he said. "Did you authorize any recent transfers?" "No," I said. "And I can tell you exactly who did. She's got expensive taste and the moral flexibility of a politician at tax season." He smiled despite himself. "We'll need a formal statement." So I gave one clear, calm, unflinching. Every date, every document, every insult that had paved the road to this moment. When I was done, Harris closed his notebook and said, "You're good at this." "I've been in training my whole life," I said. "Men underestimate you long enough. You start taking notes." He nodded. "We'll handle it from here. But I should warn you, if she's caught, there'll be press." I smiled. "Detective, the only thing Celesta hates more than being poor is being photographed while poor. Let the flashbulbs do their work." By evening, the story had already broken. "Heiress under investigation for financial fraud," read the headline on the local paper. I couldn't have written it better myself. The town predictably went into moral overdrive. People who'd once fawned over Celesta at charity galas now called her that schemer. The florist shop was busier than ever. Pity and curiosity are powerful shopping incentives. Emmett arrived that night with a grin and a bottle of something amber. "To poetic justice," he said, pouring to glasses. "To Roger," I added, lifting mine, "who's probably laughing his celestial head off." We drank to that. Huck sighed at our feet, content and slightly smug. "Think she'll get jail time?" Emmett asked. "Maybe," I said, "but that's not the point." Roger didn't want revenge. He wanted truth to do its own housekeeping. Emmett tilted his glass toward me. "And what do you want, Alice?" I looked at him, really looked. The man had sawdust on his cuffs, a scrape on his knuckle, a face carved by sun and patience. The kind of man you can build silence with. "I want peace," I said finally, "but the kind that still laughs." He reached across the table and brushed a thumb over the inside of my wrist, where Roger's bracelet still gleamed. "You already have it," he said. Weeks passed. The world, as it always does, moved on. Celesta's lawyer resigned. Gregor sent another letter, shorter, humbler, ending with "I love you, Mom." I believed him this time, mostly because he didn't ask for anything in return. One bright Saturday, Emmett and I took Huck down to the lake. The air smelled like thawing earth and pine needles. The ice was breaking, little shards drifting in the sunlight. Emmett spread a blanket and opened a thermos of coffee. "I've been thinking," he said. "Oh dear," I teased. "That never ends well for men." He laughed. "Maybe not, but I'm willing to risk it." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. My stomach dropped, not fear, not panic, but that quiet ache of recognition. I knew that color of velvet. He handed it to me. "Don't worry, it's not what you think. Roger left this with me before he passed. Said I'd know when to give it to you." I opened the pouch. Inside was a tiny gold charm, a heart-shaped locket no bigger than a thumbprint. Inside it, a folded scrap of paper in Roger's handwriting. "For when you remember that loving again isn't betrayal, it's gratitude in motion." I closed the locket, tears slipping down before I could stop them. Emmett took my hand. "He saw this coming," he said softly. "Oh, he orchestrated it," I said. "I'm starting to think I was just part of a 92-year-old matchmaking conspiracy." He smiled. "Worked, didn't it?" "Yes," I said, "but don't tell him that in heaven. He'll never let us hear the end of it." That evening, we came home to find the house glowing in the twilight. The wind chimes sang, the fire crackled, and the air felt thick with memory. I set Roger's photo on the mantel, his favorite, the one where he's holding Huck as a puppy, scowling at the camera like he's about to issue a decree. Beside it, I placed the locket. "There," I said softly, "right where you belong, old man." Emmett slid his arm around my waist. You ready to let him rest? I nodded. He already has. It's me who finally stopped pacing. Spring turned to summer. The garden, Roger's pride, burst into color. The white rose he'd left behind now sprawled across the fence like forgiveness made visible. One warm evening, I hosted dinner on the porch, my first gathering since everything had happened. The pastor and his wife came, my co-workers from the florist, even Gregor, tentative but smiling. He hugged me like a boy again and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom." "About time," I said, and we both laughed, a sound that washed away 10 years of silence. Emmett sat beside me, his hand resting lightly over mine. Huck dozed under the table, dreaming his dog dreams. As the sun sank, painting the porch in gold, I raised my glass. "To Roger," I said, "who taught me that the best revenge is to live well and laugh louder." They all echoed it. "To Roger." And in that moment, with laughter rising, with the smell of peonies and grilled corn in the air, I felt him there, not haunting, not hovering, just approving. The wind stirred the chime once more, 3 soft notes like applause. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house had quieted, I walked out onto the porch alone. The moon hung low and wide, the kind of moon that makes you honest. I whispered, "Well, Roger, we did it. The house is safe. The family, what's left of it, is mending. And I'm happy." The chime gave a soft laugh. Inside, Emmett was washing dishes, humming tunelessly. I turned to watch him through the window, the broad back, the easy rhythm of his movements. When he looked up and caught my eye, he smiled, that quiet, knowing smile, and I thought, this is what victory looks like when you've earned it the hard way. Not fireworks, not applause, just a porch, a dog, a man, and peace that hums like an old song you finally remember the words to. I closed my eyes and whispered to the night, "Thank you." And in the hush that followed, I could almost hear Roger's voice, warm and teasing as ever. "About time, Alice. About damn time." 1 year later, if you drive down Maple Lane these days, you'll see the Whitcomb house painted pale yellow, porch swing creaking, garden exploding in roses. The mailbox says Martin and Turner, but locals still call it Roger's Place. There's always music drifting from the kitchen, always flowers in the windows. Sometimes, if you stop by around dusk, you'll see a woman in a red sweater laughing with a man who builds things that last. And if you listen very closely, you might hear a wind chime sing 3 notes in the warm air, soft, bright, and satisfied. That's Roger, still approving, still here. As for me, well, I'm Alice. And this time, when life knocked, I didn't just answer. I opened the door wide, invited it in, and poured it a drink.